Hi everyone. We are still working on the master data service and we are moving slowly towards the advanced concept. Yesterday we have seen the integration between the master data services and the SQL Server databases, how we can expose the data which is available or controlled by the business through the Excel interface, how we can consume that data into SQL databases. And it's not only linked to the operational side. Later on, once we're going to see the deep analytics, like, for example, data warehousing or data marting, or even the feature sets that we are going to use for the data science. We're going to use the same data or part of the data which is flowing towards these assets from master data services, because like I mentioned, master data service is a perfect solution to implement a governance solution into any organization, especially from small to mid-scale organization, which are at the moment struggling with the data governance and data quality aspect. So master data services is really a great tool for them to actually start with the governance into their organization to improve the quality and the process of the data within the enterprise. So by saying it, today is going to be another very interesting use case, because like you have yesterday have seen that we have uploaded the data manually. So today we are going to use one use case where if we want to automate the whole process. Now imagine you are getting that data from this source system and you don't want any human intervention, like you don't want to use someone go into Excel and upload the data, because there are still chances of error. He might mess up with the data, or he was unable to create the entries properly. And we have seen many times these sort of things that once we give the access to the business and they can start manipulating the data or interacting with Excel plugin for MDS, there are always chances that they create sometime wrong entries, which is a very common human error that exists into our data world, right? So the next step that we can even improve it further, we can go and we can automate the whole process. Now imagine there is no human intervention between end-to-end solution. Whatever application is generating, that data is going to be directly loaded into the MDS entity, and it is available to your table. So how cool it is that you can use the data which is centrally controlled by the application, and it is flowing through the MDS, and then you have that data which is obviously verified by the business. So, but there is no human intervention in the whole data integration process. So that's the user case we're going to actually discuss today. So let's get started straight away. Let me show it to you. So right now we have 4 categories. I just prepared a scenario from the understanding perspective. You have seen that we have 4 product categories, and let me quickly show it to you. These 4 categories, which are referring to different product categories and then subcategory. What I did, I just create a scenario just for the understanding perspective. And just as a disclaimer, we're going to use heavy SQL into this video. So if you are not familiar with SQL, don't worry, I'm going to soon upload a full series of SQL from basic to advanced that will help you to understand how the stored procedure and all these queries or script that I have actually written, how that work, and how you can build your own script within the SQL environment. It's not that complex compared to obviously software development, but that's a different side of the dev world, right, that you need to learn. And I believe you're going to enjoy your journey while you are learning SQL, because SQL is a great language, and right now I think that that's the language to talk to data assets, whether it's going to be small data, medium data, or big data. If you know SQL, you can talk to any kind of data and extract the value out of it, right? So just to mention it before I can start. So what I did, I have created a procedure, and you can see that procedure is receiving 3 parameters. batch tag, version number, and log flag. I'm going to come back to these parameters later on, but let me just show you my source table. So if you remember analytics dev, it's a database which I've created for all the dev activities. I have created a staging schema, and in that staging schema, we have a table, for example, called products, because it is bringing all the data directly from the application. So imagine AdventureWorks is an application database, and we are getting the data from AdventureWorks into our product. And if you remember, I always mentioned that we don't absorb the data directly into our data warehouse, or our data platform. If it's coming from other sources, like from the application or from the APIs or even from the external, because that data need to be validated before we can ingest into our analytical platform. So as a tip, once you are building your integration pipelines, or once you are building for data pipelines, and even in interviews, this question have been asked a lot. So you have a source system and you have a target system, which can be the data warehouse, or which can be a database. How are you going to bring that data into the data warehouse? So obviously there must be some in-between stage where you're going to stage the data, you're going to check the validity, check the completeness, making sure the data is correct so it won't fail while you are loading it into the final destination. So that's the whole concept of staging. By saying it, I have already created a sample staging table, and I'm going to show it to you. It has 3 records just from the sample perspective. Now you can see I have a new category, which is called mobile product, and the subcategory is mobiles. And then obviously I have the subcategory name, I have the category called mobiles, and then mobile have the subcategory called Android. And then under Android, we have different products like S21, S22, A15. These are all the sample data set. I have the active status field, which actually shows these records are due to load into my MDS table, because as soon as they have been loaded, if we run it next time, it's not going, the job is not going to, or the stored procedure is not going to pick these records, because the status of this record will change as soon as they have been loaded to 1. So that means they are not going to be active anymore, right? So by saying it, you can see, I think I have used the flag in the other way around. But anyway, the logic argument which I have implemented saying that if it is 0, that means I think I need to change the column name. But anyway, if it is, the field is saying, status field is saying 0, that means this record is ready to load into our MDS. And once it has been loaded, the status is changed to 1. By the way, if it is active, yeah, that means that makes some sense from logical perspective. That is still, so once it's loaded, that means it's active, right? And as long as it's not loaded, it's going to be 0. So I think we can live with that. That's fine. It's the understanding perspective anyway. All right, so these 3 records, they had not been loaded yet. So what we are going to do, let me first show it to you the store procedure, because store procedure we can automate. And in the future video, I'm going to show you there are multiple ways like we can automate and the store procedure done, read the product and load it into the MDS or whatever system it is. Even, what we're going to do, we're going to actually run this store procedure through a SQL agent now, which is actually our job scheduling service that SQL Server provided to us. But before that, let me explain the store procedure that I have actually written to do the whole automation. So you can see I'm passing the batch tag. So batch tag is more like the identity. So whatever data you are going to load into MDS, it is attached with some sort of batch, because it's going to be a bunch of rows which we are trying to insert into the MDS model. into the entity, so that needs some sort of tagging, so we can later on identify, and that tag is going to be unique. You can I haven't actually reuse it, but obviously it's better to always use a new tag. But if you I think you are going to use similar tag, I believe that MDS is going to let you do it. Obviously version number is the quite famous one now. It is actually define, okay, which version these rows are going to tag with. So later on, if you want to get the data separate by different version, we can do it, and that's how we actually do the versioning, right? And even right now we are only inserting, but later on we have the capabilities that we can not only insert but upsert. So upsert means that if the record doesn't exist, it's going to create new record, but however if the record exists, it's going to update the record. So that's called upsearch, right? Where we have two operation happening with one statement, right? So we have different flags for that. Anyway, that's a bit advanced topic. I'm going to keep it simple. Log flag, obviously it will generate the log entities during the operation. Now, so let me, before I come to these locally declared variables, let me come in here. So you can see MDS has the staging table. So what that staging table does, whatever data we're gonna load. So you can see the same concept Microsoft is using. They actually stage that data into the staging table, and then it applies the validation and all sort of operation before it actually load it into the target entity within the MDS model. So I think it's a industry practice that always use this staging schema, even though you are fully confident with your data that your data is not going to have any issue or error, but it's always a better practice, or I would say a good practice, to stage the data, so at least you have a a framework, or as a governance perspective, you have something in place so you can validate your data before you throw it into the final container. So this table has a couple of fields. Obviously, these fields are quite familiar. So these fields we are going to use because these fields are more like, the fields of our entity within the model that we have created previously. And if you just want to refresh your memory, let me quickly go back and let me show you these fields. Let me go to the entity and let me go to the attribute just to refresh your memory. So these are all the fields that you are seeing there. We have created these fields by ourselves. If you remember, I think a couple of videos. Otherwise, if you haven't watched that video, feel free to go back and look at the video that we have created. I'm going to put that link in the description just for a reference. So all these fields we have created once we were creating that entity. So there are only two fields which are new in this statement. One is obviously bash tag, and that is referring to this field that we are passing as a parameter, and they're obviously defining the group of the row by the batch, that okay, what that batch is tagged with, or what that badge is supposed to do, right? We need to provide some sort of textual value, and it's completely up to us what kind of value we're going to actually provide, because it's more like a tagging. The second one is the most important one, import type. So Microsoft has provided different import flag. If we pass one, that's going to actually create the entity, the row as a new row all the time. So it's not like it's going to look at the existing one. If you are passing one as an import type, so regardless whether you are passing the row 10 times, it's going to create 10 new instances of the row. Keep in mind, it's a very important. There are multiple flags. I'm going to actually put those flags, or I'm going to put the article where you can actually seek the help of the import flag. That's where you can actually see the description of multiple flags. So remember, if you remember, I mentioned if you want to run the upsert operation, so I believe the status is either 0 or 2. So that means once it do the upsert, it won't go straight and insert the record. It's going to first check whether the record exists in the table, and then if it found, it's going to upgrade the record. But however, if the record is not there, it's going to create a new instance. So that's where the import type plays part. Rest of the query is pretty simple. Obviously, like I mentioned, if I'm only going to read those records where the active status is 0, and once I insert into the staging area, so that means if my records have been loaded correctly, that means my data is ready to load into my model. By saying it, I can make it more fancy, but I just at this stage, I'm just keeping it simple from the understanding perspective, because I'm showing to you how we can actually automate the whole process end to end. Next, we are executing the store procedure, because every entity has its own dedicated store procedure given by MDS, which we can use to load the data into corresponding entity within the model. So you can see we have the UDP, and the syntax is pretty clear. We have UDP and then the entity name, and then at the end is it's referred to the leaf, because the entries we are loading, they are on the leaf level. And by the way, we haven't discussed the hierarchy, so just consider that we are just entering plain data into our entity, which is good. So you can see we are in this store procedure. It requires the version name, which I have mentioned in the start, log flag, which I mentioned, batch tag. Now keep in mind that batch tag should match with this batch tag. So whatever batch tag you are providing into this staging table, you need to provide the same batch tag into the store procedure. Otherwise, the data is not going to be loaded, because once it executes, it tries to match the batch tag with the data stored in the staging table, and then it execute the corresponding routines to load it into the right entity, right? Because sometimes if we ignore that, most of the time we see the job, the data has been loaded into the staging table successfully, but then we are unable to find it into our MDS entity, and everyone is scratching their head, what happened? There was no error. So the error is not actually the syntax error. The error is logical error, because you haven't passed the same tag on both sides. So that's why if you looked at it, I have done a bit smart move, like I declared the batch tag as a store procedure parameter. So, and I use that parameter. So eventually on both sides, it's going to be always a similar value, regardless of what kind of value you are passing, right? The last statement, obviously, once my data has been loaded or my rows has been loaded, I need to change the status. So these rows won't process again once the store procedure run for the next time. So I think the store procedure is quite good and ready. It looks quite healthy. Yeah, let me quickly come in here. One more thing, I don't need to process that if I don't have the row into my store procedure, right? Because that processing, especially the insertion and the store procedure execution, that only happens if I have some candidate record sitting into my staging table in the product table, right? But if I don't have any record where the active status is 0, so that means I don't need to execute, because just the waste of waste of the resources, right? So that's why what I did as a first step, I read the total number of records where I think that's where I need to change. See, things still happen. Okay. So let me just copy that statement. I'm going to explain it. So what I'm going to count the rows where the active status is 0, because that will define that, okay, do we have any candidate row that we need to load into our MDS model. If there is no row, like if the row count, the variable where I'm storing the row is 0, that means if it is greater than 0, that means we have the rows. But if it is 0, that condition is going to be false. So my whole block is not going to be execute because I have just changed it. So let me just execute it. So we are pretty good on my store procedure. Now, as a second step, like I mentioned, I'm going to fully automate it. So what I'm going to do now, you're going to see it. I'm going to create the SQL agent job that will run the store procedure. at different interval, and you can define these interval by yourself, and that's where the continuous integration comes into the picture. Like you want to run it, after every 1-2 minutes, or after every 1 hour, or 3-4 times a day. It really depends upon your requirement and the frequency required by the business, where they want to refresh the data on the analytical system, or sync the data between source system, MDS, and the analytical system, right? So based on that, you can define this frequency. Let me first give it a name. So I'm going to call analytic. And that's the naming convention I normally use, because that will help me define or categorize the jobs. Because in SQL agent, once we start defining the jobs, at some stage the jobs are the number of jobs are quite large. So if you are not managing them properly, it will be very difficult to manage, especially once we reach more than 25, 30, or 50 jobs. Then it's really hard to keep a track of them. So always define a proper convention, especially in the name. So later on, if you come back and revisit after maybe 2-3 months, you at least what you have defined and what that job is referring. And obviously don't need to mention that, you need to document that as well. Otherwise your team or your people are not going to happy. So proper name. So you can see, I know it's sometimes I've seen really horrible name, but try to always keep name descriptive, because that will really help people who actually looked at it in your absence, or if you are not available, and they can even understand, okay, that job is loading the product information. Now coming back in here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just define the step, and step is more like what this job is going to do. Yes, product. Right, you can see even my step is quite clear. It is defining what I'm going to do, and in here what I will do, I'm just going and copy that script. Let me change my database. I'm going to run it under this one. T-SQL script, I'm just going to leave run as well, because it will use the SQL Server agent account to run it. Let me quickly explain it. So what we are doing, we are actually executing our store procedure. Execute is a command that we'll use to execute the store procedure in SQL Server. RC is a variable, because once the SQL Server execute a store procedure, it will return us the status of the execution, whether it has run successfully or there are errors. Based on that, we get the flag, and then if we have the error, we can investigate. The rest of the 3 variables, you can see they are the parameters which we are passing into our store procedure that is going to load our data into MDS table, which is pretty straightforward, right? We can make it even further dynamic, but that's not a topic of this video. We can really, automate it from end to end in every aspect. And you can imagine now you have once you have this base, you have all these possibilities to automate the thing, and even dynamically read these parameters from other location, and even give the business authority to define the tags, and based on those tags you can execute the job. But just because I want to keep it simple, I'm not going to actually go to that complexity. So all good. What I'm going to, there's a parse button which will check the command. Yeah, there's no syntactical error. Keep in mind, it's not going to tell you any logical error, which we need to debug if there is any error happen. So in the advanced on success, because we only have one, so we're going to actually quit the job reporting success. We only have one step, but if we have more steps, then definitely on the success, we're going to actually move to the next step. And then on that step execute successfully, we're going to move to the next till we reach to the last step. There's another one that we need to configure, and that is creating a schedule. So what I'm going to do, daily execution schedule and recurring, and I'm going to do it on daily, and after, and even what, yeah, daily, let me do it after every 2 minutes, because I'm just doing it to the theoretically in production. Normally your job won't run like after every 2 minutes, but that's for just our own understanding that we're gonna see how it works. So I think I'm pretty good on my schedule for 2 minutes. Alerts, these are all notification. If you have the email and the notification settings has been configured on your database engine, you can send the alerts or notification to the right people if things don't go correctly. But considering we are not looking into those areas at this moment, so I think I'll leave them blank. And I think we are pretty good because we set all the required settings in the job. Let me hit OK. And if I come in here and actually show it to you, as usual, there's a bug. It's not showing me the unless I click on the refresh button. So now you can see we have our job, which is now scheduled to run after every 2 minutes. So we're just gonna give it 2 minutes. Meanwhile, you can see your job in here as well. So now again, you can see it's a cache bug in SQL Server product, sorry, Management Studio, that it won't show you till you click on the refresh, right? So once we refresh, we're gonna see, and we have the error. So let's see what this error is telling us. Okay, so what it is saying, the job was the last step. So if we click in here, the username is unknown, the step got failed. So so that means I have to provide the username. It is not reading the username because we need the username. And if you remember, we are actually using the username in the stored procedure. And let me quickly come back in here. If I show you the stored procedure, we need that username because once we enter the data, MDS is not going to allow the data if it is not coming from the username, right? So that's something we need to follow on. And in that case, what we can do, let me see if I can actually, I have two way to fix that error. Let me start with one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually right click properties, and I am going to edit. It's not showing what is SQL. Okay, so what I'll do, considering my run as box is empty, for somehow theoretically it should pick up the username from the service account, but service account is not running from a proper user account. It's the default account that we are using, considering it's a dev box. So I might need to change a logic a little bit, which is going to be a very simple logic. I'll show you in a moment. So let me take out this, which I'm actually reading in here. I'm just going to put it as in here. I think we are good. Yeah, we are good. So all I need to now just add an additional field in here. So you can see we are pretty good, and we are going to put the username, which will help us to now, I believe that will fix all the issues. Ours, we are good. So we just click OK and we let it. And there we go. We have seen that the store procedure runs successfully and automatically. The best part now, it's going to actually run it every 2 minutes. So you can see it's run on 48 and then it run on 50 and then it's going to rerun on 52. And based on our logic, once the data has been loaded once, it's not going to load it again. So let me first go and quickly check the status of my rows. They should all change to 1. Excellent. So you can see that these rows, they are already been loaded. So once the job run next time, it's not going to pick these rows again. And now we are coming in here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually refresh to see whether, do I have 3 new rows? So let me just click on, sorry. Not getting this data. Let me see why is that. Or somehow I think the problem, I do believe, yeah. There is some troubleshoot that we need to do, not running. Okay. So you can see there must be some problem with this one, 3 records. For somehow it's unable to read out those records. So let's see if we can fix it. Let me see if I can fix that data because I need to have a look at the error. Okay, I think I identified the error. What I'm going to do, because still it's failing because of the username, it's unable to find the username because the username is not defined in the SQL agent job. So what we're gonna do, let me just first close this one off, and I'm going to disable this job so it won't run. And then come in here. And considering, because we are still reading the user information from the system, so what we are going to do, we are just providing the username by ourselves, and we can change it dynamically once we have our service account running. It's the SQL agent. So let me explain the error, why we are getting this error, because our SQL agent is running with the system service account. We normally use our Active Directory service account, which is displayed in here, and then we use that account to run all the jobs, and then we don't need to spare. But in this case, because that is a default service account, and I think I can show it to you in here. So you can see, because a dev machine, I'm using anti-service account, which is not like a proper account that we are using. So that's why it's not actually coming in here. Theoretically, in our production environment, we have the proper service account that we use to run our production SQL agent jobs, right? So we don't need to specify any account. But as a workaround, what we can do, let me just define my account, which I'm using into SQL Server. So that account is going to insert. So now you can see how MDS is strict, that it won't even allow any entry if it is not coming with the user information. So we have to provide that information. So you can see how the security from the data governance perspective is playing their part. So that's good that at least we have seen this error and we are fixing it, so that actually show you the power of the MDS, right? Because if it runs, it might not open those aspects in the video. So I think we are now pretty good. We don't need to, I think that has been repeated. Let me just take it out. Yeah. me see, all good. Yeah, username, we are not going to hopefully get any error. Yes, we are good. Let me quickly check my data because I just need to make sure the data is. I'm just going to reset my data. So now imagine we are standing on again point 0 where we have this table. And you can see this table has some records that are going to be loaded into my MDS table. We have a job that we have prepared to load it to actually make the whole system automated. I'm going to enable this job. So now we are back into our original scenario. We're gonna wait till this job run and load the data, right? And once the job runs successfully, we can see the history. So you can see the last status it has run is 9:56, and we are going to run it again. So not we, SQL Server is going to run it again at 10 o'clock because the time interval is again two minutes. And I think that's going to be finished at 10. So so you can see this time we have successfully loaded. We have run the data, and I believe we have loaded the data into the MDS. So let me just go and refresh. And now imagine that's the real way to actually test the whole scenario where there's no human intervention. We are running the job that is reading the data, which is coming, for example, from some data source, and that has been loaded into our staging area. And then from the staging, it automatically come into our MDS model. And now voila, we have these records loaded. And like I mentioned previously, the error which occurred previously was because we were unable to pass through the username who is adding these records. So MDS was very strict in a way that it won't allow any records to be loaded into the system if it is not coming from the legitimate user. So that's really a great part of the MDS. So you can see all these records, they are there. I think there were previous records that have been loaded, I think in the past run that have loaded before this recording. So you can see the old instance. But what I can do, and I'm going to actually show you how you can delete these records in this video. So if you want to delete any MDS records, what you can do, you can just select even a column of that, and there's a delete button in here, and you can hit delete, and it will ask you the selected rows will be deleted. You want to continue? Yes, we want to continue, and we are good. Just want to show you that it is not duplicating the records, right? So some records was there previously. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to regenerate the whole scenario. So how we can do the whole scenario to be regenerated, because it is all depending upon these flags. So I'm just going to change it. There are multiple ways we can, even without that we can do it, but that's again, it's going to complicate this scenario. So I think we are pretty good. So if I just run it. Yeah, so now these three records are ready to be loaded. We are back to square one. Now we're going to actually wait for next two minutes, so we can see whether the record is going to be loaded or not, right? So I'll see you once this job run again at 10:04, and we'll see whether it's going to create duplicate entry or it's going to create, a single instance of these three records. Okay, so we have the job run again at 10:04 is successful. So let me come again in here and refresh my MDS. And we have again our record, and hopefully now it's going to be 3 records only. So I think we understand what happened previously. There was some record previously that were loaded, but now considering we fixed all the errors, and that's how we work in normally in the dev environment. So I want to give you guys a live experience that how we work and fix it, not like predefined and pre-prepared scenario where we might not have that close learning. So we're gonna do the mistakes, we're gonna do learn from this error. And now you can see the one issue that I have actually discussed with you guys, that once if the service account is not configured, a proper service account against the SQL agent services, it won't allow us to insert any record into the MDS, because that is not going to be available within the SQL agent job portal in here while we are configuring our job. So we have multiple options or workaround to still run our jobs, that if that part is empty, then we can pass the username by ourselves. But obviously in the production settings we always have a service account, so you don't need to pass that parameter. I just put it as a workaround to actually let the whole scenario run. And you can see that as soon as we provide a legitimate username, it has created the entries into the MDS table. Now, last thing before I conclude this video, that 10:06, I believe the job run one more time. So let me refresh. Yeah, job run one more time, but theoretically this time it shouldn't enter any record. And there is a reason, because these 3 records have already been loaded. So you can see their status has been changed, active status to true. So they shouldn't be in the NBS model. So let me go and let me refresh. And voila, we don't have any duplicate record. So I think now you understand how the whole integration works from end to end. If I want to automate the whole process from source till the MDS, and then from there. And by the way, let me show you as a last point, because you remember we have this table as a source as well. So if you remember, we have dim products. So I'm going to show you the dim product, but this time, because we have some new product categories, so I'm going to be very excited about that category. Let me copy and let me paste it. There we go. So imagine your dimension has new data, which is coming all the way without any changing, except the changes done by the business, and they are taking full ownership of those changes because they are the custodian of that data. And then you are just on the consumer side. Whatever new data comes in, you're going to actually consume it and produce your fancy analytics or dashboard. So that's the, I think that's the end-to-end solution for MDS with the plain data set, where we are not discussing the hierarchy. And I think in this last 4 videos you have seen MDS in a great action. I have one more use case that we can use MDS to control the automation process, which I'm going to discuss in the next video. And then we'll switch towards a couple of other topics which I'm quite excited about, and I'm going to keep them as a surprise for you, so you can stay tuned for those videos. But I think from the MDS or master data service perspective, we are pretty good. Like, we start with the installation configuration all the way to the end-to-end automation. So thanks for watching this video, and if you like it, please put some comments or like the video, and I'm gonna see you in the next video.